All right, Ryen Russillo is here. 35th anniversary of Hoosiers last week. There was a long time in my life where Hoosiers or The Natural were the only two answers for what's the greatest sports movie of all time. Now, time passes. I think you get burned out on certain movies. You start picking stuff apart because you've seen it 50 times. Everybody starts pulling their own favorite movies in. I don't think it's as unassailable that those are the two best ever. I hadn't seen this probably in 2 years, and it was just, it's like putting on an old, comfortable sweater. Just slips right on. As soon as we get to the town hall meeting, you're just on a ride from that point on. As soon as Jimmy's like, hey, I got something to say, boom. Next hour plus, unassailable. What's your relationship with this movie?
I would have put it ahead of The Natural back in the day. As a kid, I always felt like The Natural got a little weird for me, where I was like, what's going on? It's like somebody shooting him. Even though The Natural, whether it's, throwing it against the barn or Wilford Brimley at the end, just all those things, they're great. I mean, it's a great, great movie. But this, as a younger kid, Hoosiers was my go-to because it wasn't as weird as The Natural was.
Yeah.
Because I'd be like, what's going on, Dad? I hadn't watched this in years. And these are the kinds of movies that have a hard time, I think, holding up. You look at some of the soundtrack decisions. Yeah. Like, what is with the synthesizer stuff that everybody loved back then? And we're in electronic mode right now, a little different. And then Hackman. I mean, Hackman, there's a reason why he was just, when's Hackman done a bad job in something? So you have this perfectly mapped out script. It's got all the elements that you need. It gets you a little weird at times in the best ways because you're connecting to it, and you're going back in time. So it was even better because it'd been a long time. I was afraid it might not hold up, but if you're sentimental about this kind of thing, it does.
Does a great job of just bringing you into this 1950s Indiana right from the drive at the top. I was lucky enough to go to the Hoosiers gym the day the Patriots lost the second Super Bowl to the Giants. Jamie Horowitz and me and one other person, we took a camera. We filmed the Grantland video at the Hoosiers gym. I'd never been there.
Butler, right?
No, I'm saying the original one.
Oh, you went to Hickory?
The Hickory.
Right.
It was whatever town. I think it's called Knightstown. It was amazing. We shot a video, went in the locker room, did the whole thing, and there was like a real almost religious vibe. It was really cool. Unfortunately, ESPN scrapped it from YouTube. But anyway, driving back, I'm going 85 because we're trying to get the game, gets stopped. The cop lets us off, doesn't give us the ticket. And now it's like, I've just been in the Hoosiers gym. I've just got off a speeding ticket for the first time in my life. And now I'm going to watch the Patriots get revenge on the Giants. They're going to beat the Giants. And it was just all lined up. And then they lost Mario Manningham. But it was up until the Mario Manningham pass, one of the 5 greatest days of my life. But he was going into that gym. It's like, we at that point the movie had been, 26, 27 years, and it really felt important. And it actually feels like there you could put the Basketball Hall of Fame there, and I'd be fine with it. Just build one hotel, move it out of Springfield, put it in Indiana. And I don't know. You could argue that that's like the home of basketball in a real way, right?
Was the town the same town? I don't know. I know you have this research down. Is the gym in the town where they did the scenics for the downtown with the one stoplight?
Yeah, Knightstown.
So that's the same town. So you drove through that. What was that town like?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's nothing. It's like one street, and it's exactly what it hasn't really changed from the movie, but it was like going to a time warp. It was really cool. Now, where they played the final game was at Butler.
Was at Butler, yeah.
Yeah. So then there's that Brad Stevens element to it that comes in 3+ decades later. This is a movie.
But to stay on, just to stay on the Butler part, because I was there that week too for the Super Bowl, and we set up going over to Hinkle, and they let us get shots up. So,
oh wow,
yeah. So where the state championship game is, we went, and they were awesome to us. They're like, "Here's a rack of balls, do your thing." We shot around for 30 minutes.
That was an awesome Super Bowl. And I remember being really dubious of the Super Bowl in Indianapolis. And I forget what hotel we were staying at, but it was figured Indianapolis. And it was awesome. I had a great time. This is a movie. I actually remember where I saw it and who I saw it with. Stamford, Connecticut. My buddy Bish, Steve Bishop, I think it was November 86. Yeah. We went, all we knew is Hackman basketball. Didn't know anything. You know, we don't have the internet in the same way back then, but we saw an ad and was like, oh, let's go. We left, I think it was the Avon Theater, and we just like flew back to my house and played basketball for like 3 hours. It was like one of those. It was like you just kind of had to play basketball after you watched it. I'm a little older than you, so I was probably 16, 17 at that point. But it was just one of those movies. It was like, oh my God, they made a movie for us. A real hardcore, awesome basketball movie that I'm going to watch over and over again for the rest of my life. And that proved to be the case.
Yeah, I think it was a little different because I was 9 or 10 and that was a VHS deal.
Yeah.
And it was still a little bit early. Like when somebody in your neighborhood get a VCR and you're like, well, how's that work? You're like, oh, well, you know, we're taping Magnum PI and Falcon Crest. So, you know, it's huge. But then you start renting videos. And when we got that one, it's the same deal. I was outside until I was getting yelled at to come back inside. And then I remember when we went to college, we would talk about high school sports and different stuff. And one of my buddies, Wayland Mass, shout out, was like, we watched Hoosiers before every game. I'm like, wait, day of? And he's like, well, no, we're not. Like, coach wasn't like, hey. So every night before a game, the team would get together and watch it. That's 20-something times in high school.
Wow. And it hits a lot of the sports movie tropes, right? It, in some ways, like, it takes the stuff. And I went on Sean's podcast because we did a podcast about King Richard, and we talked about kind of the 4 stages of sports movies. And the first stage was basically Longest Yard, 1974. And then we go into Bad News Bears, Rocky, 1976 range, and then Slapshot, and then we're off. And it's like every sport has a movie, and they kind of go through. So by 86, we had kind of done all the sports and done all the versions of it, and even like American Flyers with Costner does like the bicycling movie, and they've just hit everything. And then this one kind of goes back in time and takes all the stuff that worked in all these different movies and just nails it. It gets the major star for the movie, Hackman. It has the underdog theme in spades, right? Like this school has 64 people. It's got the Ollie scene, which is one of the best scenes in any sports movie probably ever. It's got the Jimmy Chitwood, the mystique, but you're also tying into like, sometimes you have these small schools and they have one awesome guy and he just tortures everybody and they hit that. And the biggest thing for me is the chill scenes, which I'd always, whenever I wrote about sports movies, I do feel like a chill scene is important where you're watching and just get goosebumps, even though you've seen it a million times. Hoosiers has like 7 of those where you're just like, oh man, I'm feeling that one. I'm feeling this. They have the locker room speeches and the picket fence play, and you just go through. It just every 8 to 10 minutes, there's another one. Even like the guy ripping the ticket, Coach stays. Like it just hits all the notes, and probably as well as any sports movie's ever done it.
Yeah, it really does. Like if you think of what the pitch would be like, okay, small time Indiana, underdog basketball story, small town, a coach with a past that we're not quite sure what his past is. There's a woman who he's going to have an interest in who actually kind of hates what basketball has done to the community.
Who might be evil.
Right, yeah, who kind of has a bad hang throughout the entire movie. Like there's the crowd is up and cheering like crazy, and she goes to the games and doesn't get up.
Yeah.
And just like in protest doesn't clap. And you're like, all right, yeah, I'm going to date her. But then Hackman, not sure what his options were in that size of town. Probably the best he could do. So I don't blame him.
Calling in one connection with Cletus. Yeah.
The Chitwood element of it, though, because like if you think of how the movie could have been done, you could have not had any of the Chitwood stuff and it would have worked, right? You could have not had the Dennis Hopper element to this, but there were layers to this that kept the story going in the same direction, but all these things that you kept wondering about, whether it was his background and why he left college basketball for pushing a kid, why Jimmy Chitwood is this guy that everybody's this legendary guy, the Hopper part where he's doing this when nobody wants him to do it. There could have been a stripped down version of this that probably would have held up, but that's what the great movies are, the great storytellers that they do. They add all these different elements. So even though you kind of know what this movie's going to be, they had really cool B stories that just rounded it out in a way that a lot of other movies I think miss on.
Chitwood is used almost like the shark from Jaws in this movie. We see him make a couple shots, and then we have the one Norman. I'll just say this now. I'm stepping on one of the categories, but one of my favorite sports movies things is a scene with dialogue where one of the guys is shooting baskets and making every basket as they're doing this scene. The best one of this is Bob Cousy in Blue Chips, where he's making one-handed foul shots as Nick Nolte is talking to him. Bob Cousy's the athletic director. And he's just making foul shots. And at one point, Nolte breaks character. He's like, Jesus, do you ever miss? Because Cousy makes like 11 in a row. And it was like, in the script, he was just shooting foul. He wasn't supposed to make all of them. Chitwood has the same scene pretty early when he goes to see him, when he does the I don't care if you play or not. And he makes like 13 in a row or 12 in a row, something like that. And he's just like draining them. And so you're like, oh man, if we can only get Jimmy on you're locked in. Like, oh man, we got to get Jimmy on this team, man. The team's going to take off. It's just really, everything is really well crafted. And the story behind this movie, Hackman hated it. Like there's so much Hackman stuff of like, this is going to ruin my career. I hate being here. Like he was a complete dick on the set. And a lot of that stuff has come out because he didn't see it. And then when they cut it together and he was doing VOs, he was like, my God, this is a good movie. But he was miserable the entire time.
I heard the same thing about Tom Hardy and Mad Max. So Hackman Hardy similarities that we didn't even know that were there, where Hardy was like, this isn't going to work. The Chitwood scene. So that is, I mean, the legend is that was the first take and he just made all those shots outside.
Yeah. Well, okay. He was the only one who didn't play college hoops, but he had like a Mike Miller, Ray Allen type of jump shot where it's just one of those jump shots where you're like, man, that's a nice looking shot.
Okay, so there was a camp. I went to IMG Academy for this thing where we went down with David Thorpe's crew, who worked at ESPN, who's still a long-time basketball coach. And they had this whole thing where they were going to teach us what it was like for pre-draft prep. They're going to put us through drills. We were going to talk to social media coaches. We talked to Nick Bollettieri, who basically just told us he was awesome for like an hour. And it was a really great experience. And you're staying on IMG's Academy the whole time, right? But then they brought in their actual high school studs. And, these are some of the best high school basketball players in the country. And I remember being like, are they going to ask? Like there was me and there was another guy that might have been good enough. And they didn't ask me and they asked him if he wanted to play with them. And I immediately was like, all right, now I'm pissed. But what I remember about the other kid was that, and this is really interesting, is that Thorpe was like, are you from the Midwest? And the guy was like, no, why though? And he goes, the way you shoot the basketball looks like you're from Indiana. And then he was like, my father is. And wow, these guys, and again, these are basketball lifers. They could just tell the way he shot the ball. There had to have been some Midwest connection because of just the way he carried himself as a player. And he's a really good player. And the way he shot, they were like, what are you, where'd you, and he's like, oh, my dad is. And they were like, and he taught you how to shoot. And he goes, yep. And they're like, all right, exactly. It was pretty crazy.
I'm not surprised to hear that because I do feel like there's different styles. Although now like AAU has basically made it into like people falling out of an assembly line with the way they all shoot the same, act the same. On fast breaks, you run to the corners for the threes, stuff like that. There's a little homogeny that didn't exist back in the day. This movie, it was made for $6 million. Probably most of it went to Hackman. It made $28.6 million. So it, more than quadrupled.
Almost tripled. No.
Yeah. And yet it had these legs. And I think part of it, we've talked about this on the Rewatchables sometimes with movies in the mid 80s. At that point, you have some of the cable channels are in play already. You have HBO and you have TBS and a couple other ones. But more importantly, you have the VCRs and you have video cassettes. And I remember in college, I probably brought like 6 or 7 movies with me to college, and one of them was Hoosiers. And it'd be one of the ones we threw in. And I remember I had a bunch of White Shadow episodes and you just had you brought like your 7, 8 things. And Hoosiers, I think through the late 80s and on, it became something else because the movie I think was successful. Again, 28.6 million, solid in the mid 80s, but it had this tale. And I think The Natural did too, of a rewatchable sports movie tale where those kind of became the two that emerged along with, I think, Slapshot. And then maybe Rocky 3, Rocky 4. And there were just some that you watched over and over again. We had so many less options back then, and Hoosiers was like one of the most reliable things you could throw on. You felt good. You're happy at the end. I love you guys. And it just ballooned in a way that I don't think anybody could have predicted. By the time we got to the mid 90s, the thing was massive.
Yeah, but we always love that underdog story, but we want it to be somewhat believable. And this is based on a true story. So you've got that part of it too. And when I watched Hackman in this, maybe it was the way he did it because he's so good. But don't you feel like in a weird way, and I don't know what the shooting order was of the scenes, but it almost feels like he warms up in the movie.
Yeah.
And maybe that was the whole point because he's coming to this town and he has to warm up to all these different things. But in the beginning, watching it this week, I was kind of like, what the hell are they doing? Like there was even some basketball stuff where I was like, what are they talking about? And I think the biggest thing with any of these sports movies to have authenticity or to last is to have authenticity. And it's very clear that all the guys played and it looks
well, and also
real.
that they looked like early 1950s players, like the one-legged set shots and stuff like that.
Right.
Like, it was very, very 1950s-ish.
The casting, I mean, even the faces in the crowd, Bill, like I was looking at that and I go, how meticulous was this about all the extras and every face that popped up? I mean, you feel like it's shot back then. So these movies, the sound and the quality and stuff, like it's just hard for them to last. But I think this one lasts because we all love these kinds of stories. We get them told over and over and over again with different versions, different costumes, same story all the time. But if you're going to do sports, you can't screw it up. And this is a time where I think, like even when you go back and watch the Rocky stuff, where I don't want to offend you, the fight scenes are preposterous.
No, I'm with you. Yeah,
right.
there's no crowd behind them.
Like, what were you guys thinking? And yet everybody loved it and ate it all up. And you kind of laugh when you watch it now. I'm watching the basketball stuff from this week and you're going, all of these guys kind of knew what they were doing. So their technical coordinators and all that kind of stuff were terrific. And I think that's another reason why it lasts.
That's a really good point because the movies from the 70s had a lot of stuff they hadn't thought through. Like Bad News Bears and Breaking Training, which I love. Kelly Leak bats every inning in that game, even though it's a 9-person order. It's like, oh, Kelly Leak's up again. He bats five times in a 4-inning game. And it was a lot of glitches like that. Like Longest Yard had some scoreboard stuff. And Rocky 1, there's just shots where you see empty seats behind them and so on because they're just trying to, they're rushing through the movies. They're not expecting this, they're not expecting like us to dissect these movies for the next 50 years. They don't see this world where cable's coming and VCRs, all that stuff. Hoosiers really did put time, thought, energy into all the little stuff. And I think that's one of the reasons it worked. Even The Natural, Redford was too old to be Roy Hobbs. That's the flaw of the movie. And I think that's why if you're going greatest sports movie ever, they have scenes where he's supposed to be like 17, like chasing Glenn Close around. He's like 46 or 48 when he's filming the movie, and it's just a flaw. Hoosiers did the best job, I think, of all the early great sports movies of managing the flaws.
I even look for stuff, and I don't know why I do it.
Scoreboard stuff? Like, wait a second. Stuff, right, it was 28-20. Now it's 26-20?
So it was 2018, and they hit a 2 because there's no 3s. And as I was watching it, I go, wait, why did it click 3 times? And I go, did they screw up the score? I don't know why I do this stuff. I just do it. I notice it all the time. Like when I rewatch Mad Men so many times, like I'll notice like, drink is empty. It's full again. And it's like, dude, these guys had drinks in their hand for the entire 7 years. So they're going to miss a couple here and there. It's not being an idiot. So as soon as I saw the clock, the scores, again, the scores, the
scoreboard on the side. Yeah.
Yeah. New here. It's my first time talking about scoreboards. It goes from 18, 19, and then 10, and then 20. Because they would have to just manually turn the numbers up. And I remember just out of the corner of my eye being like, wait, why did it click so many different times? I'm like, oh, that's the way the scoreboard used to work back then. And I'm like, man, that's good. That's really good. I mean, it's stupid little things, but whatever.
I mean, you have Teen Wolf the year before where they're just looping the same play 3 different times during the comeback. We see the same. We see the
belief.
Yeah, that was maybe not the most unbelievable part of Teen Wolf, but yeah, there's a couple moments on the Gene Hackman stuff. So the director did an interview with Vulture a few years ago, David Anspaugh, and he said Gene had me on the verge of a nervous breakdown. I thought every day in the film was going to be my last. Gene's agent was trying to get me fired. The only thing that saved my job was the dailies. He said Hackman showed up, coolest guy to hang out with, funny and irreverent, told great stories. First day shooting, I didn't recognize him, became an entirely different person, made it hell on earth for me every day. Everything was negative. He wanted off the movie. Then the writer, producer, Angelo Pizzo, says, when he arrived, he was in a generally foul mood. We called him the Black Cloud. He started complaining about everything. And then Pizzo claims that Hackman told him on the last day of filming, I want you to be prepared for the fact that this movie might get on a few screens here in Indiana, but then it will end up in the dustbin of films that never made it. And the only people who remember it are you two. And I hope I forget it when my plane lands in Los Angeles. Gene Hackman, just shitting on the movie.
Wow.
So there you go. He did not expect it. And he's a famously grouchy guy.
Shocking.
He doesn't do press. He's kind of known to be, I think other actors love working with him because he's just all about the work. He has no time to be friends with anybody. But I think, he's a famously grouchy guy. Anyway, this turned out to be, I would say, the most watched movie he probably ever made. When you think of how many people watch versions of this, how it still lives on. French Connection's the best movie he ever made, but how many people under 35 are talking about the French Connection?
Enemy of the State's probably a rewatchable because it's just
Enemy
really
of the State's up there. The Conversation, I think, is another
Conversation's really a tough rewatch movie. Though.
Yeah, it's rooted in the 70s.
He's awesome
Unforgiven,
in it, though. Yeah,
Unforgiven is another one. He's made some bangers, but I think Hoosiers is the one that kind of lived on the most for him. So it's pretty funny that he hated it.
The problem for him in Unforgiven, even though he's great in it, and honestly, Unforgiven is one of my all-time favorites. I mean, but Clint just goes through. He's Steph Curry in the fourth quarter.
Clint's unbelievable.
He's just, at some point, Clint just destroys everybody else, not just because of the story, but there's the range of what he goes through in that movie. All right, I know this isn't the Unforgiven rewatchable, but invite me on it.
No,
you guys done that one?
Next year, 30th anniversary.
All right, I'll gladly be in.
My dad's third favorite movie of all time. My dad is the number one Clint Eastwood guy. And we saw Unforgiven in the Cape that summer, whatever summer it came out. And he was hyped. And we walked out. I don't think I've ever seen him happier other than maybe some Boston sports wins. It was everything you wanted from Clint. Clint, Will Money, just laying it down. Last 20 minutes. Hopper gets an Oscar nomination for this movie. Jerry Goldsmith nominated for an Academy Award for his score. Neither one. Roger Ebert, guy who loves story. 4 stars. Hoosiers work, this is what he wrote. Hoosiers works a magic in getting us to really care about the fate of the team and the people depending on it. In the way it combines sports with human nature, it reminded me of another wonderful Indiana sports movie, Breaking Away. It's a movie that is all heart. Raj loves plot. He loves heart. And this will be interesting to see who wins this. I'm just going to give you the candidates. And if I missed anything, chime in at the end. Normdale kicking George out of practice. George. Eddie Harris from Major League, that guy. George thinks he's going to run the practice. No. Then George does, look, mister, there's 2 kinds of dumb. Just, Craig, play that clip. Hackman hears it. He storms off. Hey, leave the ball, will you, George? And then he's like, hey, what kind of team do I have here? Great stuff. Good start. Coach visits Jimmy. We mentioned this earlier. I don't care if you play or not. Jimmy makes his first 12, misses 1, finishes 13 for 14 in the scene.
But don't you think he missed it because he says it?
Yeah, he gets rattled.
Right. He wants him to be impacted by, I don't care if you play or not. So I don't think that miss doesn't count.
I'm counting it.
Okay.
This is incredible. The should we fire Coach Dale town meeting leading right into the Jimmy's on the team kicking ass montage. I'm combining those two.
You love
some highlights.
Montage.
I love the montages. Some highlights. Barbara Hershey, we think as Mira Fleener, who hasn't had a nice moment this whole movie and is genuinely mean-spirited when she does I don't want Jimmy coaching here when he's 50 is one of the meanest things probably ever said in a sports movie. Just brutal. Just really hits you.
Or when she's like, oh, you're the new coach. And he's like, yeah. Am I being interviewed again? She's like, I thought you were going to be younger. And he's like, all right, sweet. Nice to meet you too.
Great. Yeah, it must be, what a nice place to be.
He lets her have it though. He does. A little sign. He's like, if everybody else is going to be this nice.
So she goes up there. We think she's going to smoke him with the whole, he got in a fight with a player on his old team. I think it would be a mistake to let him go. Give him a chance. Myra kind of turning a little bit. Then all of a sudden we see Jimmy. What's he doing here? Walks by the guys, dramatic entrance. He says 3 of his 4 lines in the movie. I got something to say. I don't know if it'll make any change, but I figure it's time for me to start playing ball. One other thing. I play Coach Stays. He goes, I go. I wrote this once. In the history of sports movies, only Ivan Drago, I think, did more with less. Jimmy has 4 lines in this entire movie. So he rips off 3 of them. They revote. And then Mr. Butcher rips up the votes. Coach Stays. And then all of a sudden, we're kicking ass with Jimmy. We're right there. The music lifts in. Dennis Hopper goes off the wagon. Hackman does I didn't think I could cut it the other night either, but after what Jimmy did, it would take the Indian National Guard to get me out of here. It's one of the best 9-minute sequences in any sports movie.
All right, can I throw a theory at you?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Is Jimmy Chitwood an asshole? Let me present my case.
Let's hear it.
All right, everybody knows you're a legend. You have nothing else going on. All right, nothing else going on. You're showing up to practices to like watch as some reminder that you're in the background. Like, hey, coach, I'm awesome and I could fix all your problems, but I'm just going to hang out here in the hallway.
Wait, are you talking about Ben Simmons or Jimmy Chitwood?
That's what I'm asking. Did Jimmy Chitwood lay the foundation for today's NBA player empowerment?
Interesting. So in the early 50s, player empowerment, not a thing yet. Jimmy didn't have say in the coach. Didn't want to play.
If this movie came out in 1979, I don't know that we can't blame Magic Johnson for getting Pat Riley into the role, other than blaming it on Jimmy Chitwood, but it came out years after Magic did that. So I'm not even sure I'm convinced of the theory. I just needed to throw it out there.
Well, I had this in nitpicks. We'll just do it now. It's unclear why he's not playing. Myra Fleener says,
no, it's like a family thing.
He was attached to the coach. Right. The old coach died.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, well, it's still basketball. Like, get out there, Jimmy. What else are you going to do? You're going to like work in the local pharmacy? Like, you're the best player Indiana's had in 40 years. Get out there.
Pharmacist would be a great job for that town. 1951.
Yeah, I guess that would be a good job. Next rewatchable scene, the picket fence. Hopper's greatest scene. Hackman gets himself kicked out of the game. Hopper freezes. His son, Everett, pulls him in. Dad, you reckon they'll go to number 15? Boom, we're off. Get a defensive stop. I'm still not sure what his defensive instructions there. He's like, hey, Reed, let yourself get off, and Buddy's gonna, and then somehow that works.
By the way, love this scene because it's the first time the son is after we've seen him shun the father a few times.
With reason.
And yeah, right. I mean,
he is the town drunk. It gets tough after a while.
In a town like that's a tough role. It's a tough role.
Yeah.
And Hopper, I mean, as you'd expect, because Hopper's maybe better than anybody. I mean, that's including Hackman. And Hopper kind of like hesitating and he's in this, like he's frozen. You're right. The son takes him out. And then when he gives the instructions, it's delivered perfectly because it's like you see his breath. Oh, okay. All right. The fog is starting to part, but I'm with you. I rewound that play 3 times because he's like, they're going to go low. And then,
let yourself get taken out. It doesn't match up with the instruction, but it's fine. They get the steal.
Right.
And then they run the picket fence. The town drunk finally with the car keys decides not to run the final play for Jimmy Chitwood, the best player of the state in 40 years, but it still works. Merle hits it coming off the picket fence. Craig, run the Hopper thing here. We're going to run the picket fence at him. It's great. Leading to celebration. And then the son going, you did good, Pop. You did real good. Little chill scene with a little lump in the throat. Won his son over a little bit there. Anyway, that's a great scene. And the picket fence, does that work in real life? Like, do teams actually run the picket fence? Could that work anymore in 2021? Because I feel like the Warriors kind of do versions of that with Steph Curry. It's like it's the evolutionary picket fence, some of the stuff they do to get him free.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we call it hammer, where you run to the corner, but you're running your guy through a screen that's set up there.
Double
you're not
pick.
curling it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this is going to sound hilarious, but after it came out, my dad was our coach. So I think that would have been my 5th grade team. And they ran the play for me. It was called Ted because he named it after Ted Williams. So when we ran Ted, it was a double screen on the right block. And I mean, dude, we're 9 or 10. Nobody's exactly fucking fighting over a screen at 10 years old.
Right.
Knows what the hell's going on. But we ran it because of the movie.
I'm not surprised to hear that.
Yeah.
Next one's a short scene, but the Terhune game. And Terhune's the rival school, and we find out in the deleted scenes which we'll get to, that Terhune is actually a bigger part of the movie. I'm not going to spoil that for you. Great fight scene. Jimmy, flagrant 2 on Jimmy, gets shoved in the back on the layup. Flatch comes in, punches the dude, gets thrown into the trophy case. Looked like it hurt. And then Gene gets to do that's a gutless way to win to the other coach. And that coach is like a great bad guy, evil coach, but leads to them winning the game. Good celebration, fans pouring out. Terhune game's really good.
The gutless line, by the way, is perfectly delivered. Yep. I don't know that someone else, I don't know how much research you did on the basketball background of the screenwriter, but to know whether that was in there or whether Hackman knew enough about sports or whatever. I mean, Hackman as a coach is as believable as any character you're ever going to see.
Yeah.
But that was such that's exactly what that Hackman guy would say in real life if the other team's begging for a forfeit. And you're just so hot and you're like, that's gutless. That's a gutless way to win this game. It was perfect.
Yeah. Next scene is the Linton game. Up 4. Some foul trouble. Buddy fouls out, but he finds out what gum the kid had.
10-10.
Strap has to get rolled in. Now, I would argue Strap should have played more. I like what I saw from Strap.
I agree. Strap didn't get enough minutes.
Looked like kind of the third Plumlee, maybe Plumlee's grandfather. Which Plumlee's on Charlotte? Is that Miles?
Romulus?
I think of like a Plumlee. He had a little jump hook. He's a banger. Little Rick Roby-ish. I don't know. I
loved what I saw. I mean, he said God was running through him, but I don't know.
He had a religious thing. So anyway, unfortunately, Ollie has to go in. And apparently Ollie played college ball in real life, but does a nice job of just being like the terrible runner who doesn't know what he's doing. I don't love the dribble off the foot. That seemed pretty staged. I probably would have done another take of that one. I didn't love the air ball either. That's like 4 feet short. Like even Ben Simmons wasn't ever that bad at free throw shooting. But then it leads to, you know where it's going to happen. Hey, Jimmy, underrated kind of potential GOAT moment where he gets stripped on the final play, but it goes right to Ollie. And then Ollie goes to the free throws. And I got to say, like, the concept of the run of the team is going to hit 2 free throws to send this team to the state finals is one of the most brilliant moves in any sports movie. It's fucking amazing. It's so good. And I love how they shot it, especially the second one where you got the crowd behind the basket and you see the ball and it hits the back of the rim and goes up and in. And then they cut to the one team is like, can't believe it. And then the fans are going to, it's just, it's so good. Everything, they nail every part of that.
Really smart though to have the ball in Chitwood's hands, and then it leads to Ollie ending up with it because it wasn't going to make sense. It wasn't going to make any sense for Ollie to ever touch the ball in that possession. There's no way he makes the first one. Sorry, I think he goes 1 for 2 at best in that situation. But it's a movie; we'll allow it. The other thing I noticed is what was the team? Do you remember the team name he hits the free throws against? I forget.
Linton.
Whatever. A bit of a Mitch Teen Wolf moment there when the guy with 35-year-old Tom Selleck chest hair walks by him to bump him. Now, not as absurd as Teen Wolf where they let Mitch stand under the basket.
Yeah, that's never can be defended ever at any point. It's never happened in any basketball game ever in the history of basketball.
But when that kid bumps into Ollie, I was like, how old's we got a birth certificate on this guy?
Right. You think there's some chicanery? Maybe he's like 28 in real life?
I can't imagine how poorly records were kept back in 1951 in central Indiana.
Yeah. Good job by Merle coming in, too, to settle him down a little bit. You just focus on your free. Great scene. Thumbs up, awesome, all the way around. The pregame speech before the regional finals. Coach says, we're way past big speech time. I want to thank you for the last few months. They've been very special to me. Anybody have anything they want to say? We go to Merle. Let's win this one for all the small schools that never had a chance to get here. Fucking great. Buddy, who disappears from the movie for 20 minutes, he's back. The coach has now won him over. Let's win for Coach who got us here. That was nice. The Reverend comes in, immediately does the David and Goliath. David put his hand in the bag, does his whole thing. Back to Coach. I love you guys. Everybody. Team. It's incredible. And then had a second life on the Jumbotron. The Jumbotron revived that scene early 2000s. They started playing it during timeouts. I think it was one of the first ones. They did that and they did the slow clap. And that was like another way Hoosiers just kind of lived on and on. But that pregame speech is fantastic.
You know what scene is really small, but I loved when I watched it this week because it fired me up is it when Hopper comes out just off a bender and starts arguing the call?
Yeah.
And then does Hackman say stay in the game to Hatch?
He does you stay in the game is one of his few coaching things.
His delivery though on that one. Now, if I'd been Hatch, I'd be like, I want the fucking ball next possession. Don't worry about it. Because I'm taking it out on everybody else in the world, what I have to deal with. That's a chill moment for me. An underrated chill moment. So
yeah. Is that coming? Oh, we already had that one.
Well, we sort of touched on it. I didn't deliver the rest of my, I wanted to make sure I got that in there.
Then we have the last few minutes of the big game. We could have, for Rewatchable, it's a shorter scene, but you could have had them measuring the basket and the free throw line. Is really smart. It's just a great little 1 minute scene. I like it. The last four, basically the entire game is really rewatchable, but especially the last few minutes. I don't know do you want to talk about the South Bend High coach now? Or do you want to save that for picking nits?
Let's save it for picking nits.
All right.
Then. It's your call. You do whatever you want.
Well, it leads to tie game, 20 seconds to play. And I have some picking nits on this too that we're going to do, but Jimmy ends up hitting the game-winning shot. It has that great moment. They really do a nice job with Jimmy getting carried off. We get that shot. The fans charging on the court is great. Then the shots of the South Bend guys kind of reacting to it, and the guy sitting on the floor, and then the one guy, their big rebounder, is kind of pointing at the floor where he's like, man, that Jimmy Chitwood, he's got that some sort of vibe. Just everything they nail. It's great.
Yeah, because those things are very easy to just overlook. Like, hey, everybody runs out on the court, carry off Jimmy.
That's done. And the game's over.
You look at people and you're like, that guy doesn't look like a guy who just lost a state championship.
They really look like they lost.
It's perfect because everybody's kind of doing their own way of being disappointed. Yeah. So really good job.
And then the ending, which is short, but just the way they have the gym and it's quiet and then it settles on the picture and we hear his voice and then finally it ends up with I love you guys. I think the most rewatchable scene is the Ollie scene, the Linton game for me. And it's tough because I think there's so many great ones, but I think I would go with that. I just love everything about how they shoot that is really great. I like Coach holding the ball up after and everything. It's just a home run.
I like when Hackman goes up to Hopper's shack to just chop it up with him. And this could be a pick and nit, but if you're going to be on that kind of a bender, when did you have time to scout the other teams? Like, oh, I got Cedar Falls tonight, so I'm not going to drink whiskey.
Maybe he's just a really accomplished alcoholic.
Well, he's just, or either that, or he just, he cared about scouting. He's so good in that. And then, what else is great too, is that his nickname's Shooter and he missed the game-winning shot. And then he's like, got fouled though. And you're just like, all right, loser.
What do you have for most rewatchable scene? What scene?
I think when he goes and he's serious and he tells Hopper to be on the staff. And
Oh, you love
like,
that as a writer.
Yeah.
You like the writing in that scene.
I like the writing in that scene because it's like my point in the beginning was that there's a lot of stuff in here that makes it that much better that I don't think we see all the time. Like the reason why this movie is what it is, like they didn't have to do any of that stuff. They could have done such a different stripped down version of it. And then they're like, no, Hackman's going to go up to Hopper and be the only guy that has his back, which is paying it forward in a way where this guy running the high school was like the only guy that was going to have Hackman's back. So he, for whatever reason, he shows the side of him where he's like, I'm going to do something that nobody else would do for this guy, when even his son's like, what are you doing? And also when he's like, I'm going to need you to wear a suit. And then Hopper's line where he's like, oh, I got a wing dinger in there. Wing dinger is unbelievable. And then he's like, I'm going to need you, you can't drink.
I love when he shows up for the first game and he has that kind of awkward walk where it's like he obviously hasn't worn a suit in forever, and just like the way everything he does. Hopper's fantastic in this movie. I have him in What's Age the Best. Just the Hopper performance. And Hopper, I think if he was an athlete, he would be one of those athletes that we talked about where like that guy was pretty great, but man, if he had his shit together in a better way, he could have been even greater. I think people feel like he was on par with Nicholson and some of those guys from that generation, but he kind of fucked up his life in different ways. Hackman, we talked about, you talked about how awesome he was in this movie. If you're talking about coaches doing basketball coach things in a movie, Nolte was good too in Blue Chips, I thought. He's basically doing a Bobby Knight impersonation, but really crushed a lot of it. And Hackman, I think, would be in the finals. This was, as much as I loved Affleck in The Way Back, there was some like, wait, have you ever coached a team before? Moments with him on the bench with stuff. Hackman, like from the way he's holding the little program or whatever he has, like the way he talks, the short, like loud, passionate sentences, and he just kind of seems like a coach. He did a great job.
Yeah, it's as believable as anybody that's coached in a movie. I thought Nolte was good in Blue Chips because this is kind of a weird reference, but the reason Spider-Man is so great is because of Peter Parker. It's not even Spider-Man as much as it's Peter Parker. And Nolte was great as the aggrieved, the fucking walls are coming in around me. Like he was great playing the role even away from the basketball court. Like he was so believable as this guy that's like, all right, I got to sign this deal with the devil because I'm so sick of all this shit that I'm dealing with. Where Hackman, I mean, he had to have played ball at some point. He had to have, had a coach. I mean, maybe he's just that brilliant of an actor, but there was something about him where it never felt like a reach ever. The only part that I ever thought was kind of weird was I wasn't sure what his system was. Like if we're being super critical basketball guys at the beginning, I mean, other than being the most boring practices, and I've played for coaches when I was a little kid and you'd be on travel teams and stuff. And you're like, all right, no ball first 2 weeks. You're like, fuck this. Like, we're young. We're little kids. Like give us a ball and let's go. And you'd have these guys that wanted to be Bobby Knight that was like cared about your conditioning at 10 years old. Who gives a shit? And then in high school, conditioning obviously means a little bit more, but, different coaches that you would play for, different stuff that you would do. I never knew what Hackman's offense was in the beginning, other than make sure you pass it all the time, which wasn't exactly working out because again, the guys didn't buy into the system. But there was some basketball disconnect there in the beginning.
There was some high post stuff with Flatch, little Anthony Davis-esque, trying to isolate him like Dirk style on the high post. All right, more What's Age the Best. The concept of a Jimmy Chitwood is a really fun sports movie trope, and Bad News Bears does it too with Kelly Leak, where the shadow over the team, this underdog team, and it's like, here's this one savior guy, but he's either a fuck up or he's going through something, and if we can only get this guy, the team's going to take off. Very smart, but just in general, the Jimmy Chitwood, which we've seen in high school and in college specifically. Ironically, Steph was a Jimmy Chitwood when he was at Davidson. This guy who's just way better than all his teammates, but the team has figured out how to just accentuate all the stuff he's good at, and maybe we can ride this Jimmy Chitwood guy. It's always fun when it happens, especially in the tournament, when somebody goes Jimmy Chitwood for a couple games, and we could just see it. I like Flatch going to see Hackman. What you doing, my dad? I'm not seeing it.
That's really good. I don't know that there's many people that have ever impersonated him, but that's very good.
And coach is like, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Jimmy's jump shot. So Jimmy is, I added it up, 37 for 41 in this movie. Misses 4 shots total.
Steph wishes.
Mr. Butcher. So there's Wade Butcher, and then his brother, who is the one that walks off with Buddy at the beginning and then comes back and apologizes. Those guys are brothers. And the dad comes in and he eventually becomes the assistant coach. And it's
Which,
like,
by the way, when was he named assistant coach?
He had to come in when Cletus, in the town drunk, you need some assistant coach backup if the town drunk is the other one. But yeah, that scene I think got cut out. But I enjoyed his stuff where he's just like the good guy who's all he does is bring happy, good stuff to the table, nothing bad. You don't have to run plays for him. He's just setting picks. The we want Jimmy, and then Hackman looking at the crowd going, this is your team. Good stuff. I really like Wade Butcher. I enjoyed his athletic ability in this movie. I wrote 20 years ago that it was a little Danny Ainge-ish, his game. Little like combo guard. One-legged set shot. Good defender.
I like
frisky,
Ray.
feisty. Comes in with a nice sucker punch when
got a mouth on him. Little Ainge-ish.
Little mouth on him. Little feisty. Like a little Ainge-ish. The music we talked about, but the na 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 na. It's just uplifting. And everything else we covered. Any other what's age the best for you?
Well, I just have a story. I don't know if you knew this, but I have a bit of a Jimmy Chitwood in my own personal basketball story in high school.
Yeah.
I could tell you're already excited for this.
Let's hear it. No, I'm on the edge of my seat.
I transferred to a different high school, and I thought I was going to be like pretty good, but I wasn't much to look at. Everybody kept wondering why my dad was 6'5", and I was what I was at the time. It took me a while. And then I got hurt. And so then my senior year, I kind of knew the coaches didn't believe in me, and they liked all these local kids, and I was an off-islander, and I was pissed about it because I was playing in pickup games with all those guys, and I was like, I'm just as good as every one of these guys. And I sat down with my dad. I was like, I don't think I'm playing. He's like, you're not going to play any varsity basketball after this entire life of like, it was like a no-brainer. I would have made the team. And again, this is not high-level basketball we're talking about. And I was like, no, I'm not going to play. I'm like, fuck it. Those guys don't even like me. I'm not going to fucking play. It's not like I'm playing in college anyway. So that whole year, I worked on my game by myself in anticipation of this seniors versus faculty showdown that was like an event that they had. And the basketball team was your coaches. They were your coaches, the students.
Yeah.
I looked at that game. I've never cared about a game as much in my entire life as that one. And I had 17 in the first half. And people came down from the stands in the Vineyard Winter, and they're like, who the fuck are you? So like,
yeah.
Where are you doing? What are you doing? How are you not on who are you? And I went, ask them. And I pointed to the coaches, like the real coaches, and they left. They left at halftime. And it was like this is such a loser story because I don't have the state championship and the jumper to win it.
Yeah.
But I related to him a lot, except for the good parts.
So you never played varsity?
I never actually played
senior year.
I never played a minute of more varsity basketball. So it was pretty funny because it still bothers me, but I just felt like I was being wronged. And my father and I were like, that's it. Screw it. We're not doing it. And I was like, all right. And then I was thinking about transferring again. But again, it wasn't like I derailed an offer from UNC here. So let's not overstate things. But I remember once I decided that's it, I'm done. I spent a year getting ready for this stupid scrimmage that was going to be in front of because everybody would go to it. There's nothing to do. And then
this sounds like it should be your sports movie, but a movie set in the 80s of Martha's Vineyard or 90s.
Early 90s. Come on.
Early 90s. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when guys came down from the stands, because we were getting ready for the second half, they're like, what's going on? Like, how are you not on the team? And I went, ask those guys.
Ask them.
Ask them. It's still awkward. My dad goes into the hardware store. We'll see one of those guys. And it's not always cool.
Then when you were on Van Pelt show for 2 years and your name wasn't in the title, and they were like, why is your name in the title? And you looked at whoever, ask them.
4 years. Name not
4
on the
years.
show.
Sorry. My bad. What's age the worst? Barbara Hershey as Myra Fleener. This was a sports movie trope for 20 years. I called it the Adrian Balboa Hall of Fame, the token wet blanket female character in a sports movie who's just there to suck the life out of our hero. I don't know why they did it this way. She's the most kind of evil, mean-spirited version of it. And then the team starts winning. And of course, she jumps on the bandwagon, no different than Adrian in Rocky IV. I don't understand why she's this mean. Now, apparently there's deleted scenes where her character's arc is much better, including and the deleted scenes came out on DVD in like 2003, 2004 range. There's a Hickory rally scene before one of the last two games. Maybe it's the last game. And Myra pulls Coach Dale aside. She's smiling, soft voice, thanks Coach for everything, wishes him luck in the big game, and says she's moving to Chicago, win or lose. And she said, I just wanted to thank you. I wouldn't have had the courage to do this without you. And then she says, you know, Chicago isn't that far away. So she likes him. They cut the scene out. There's a lot of stories about this. The studio was like, this has to be under 2 hours. The final film is 1 hour 57. They cut that scene out. They cut out the scene when Buddy asked to be back on the team, which Buddy just shows up. And I was like, when I got my column on ESPN, I was writing about this. Like, what? Buddy just comes back. This guy storms off. And then 20 minutes later, he's, guarding the other team's best player. It's like, how did we go to 8 players all of a sudden?
There was a story. There was a story back in Bristol that John Walsh read that. And they're like, hey, this guy writing about how did Buddy just show back up?
Let's give him a raise.
Let's get behind this guy.
Yeah. So there's 19 minutes of scenes missing, including stuff like that. How did Buddy get back? Why is Myra Fleener so awful? Well, not as awful if they had kept some of the deleted scenes.
I always wondered, like, when Hackman helps old grandma over there with the feed truck, and she's like, well, about time we had dinner. And he's like, all right. And then he's looking over at her and he's giving like Gene Hackman aroused eyes, which you don't see a lot. And it amazing. I immediately started thinking, like, maybe Hackman's mad all the time because how many other stars have had his run without the sex scenes? Like, do you think Hackman was ever on set going, hey, you think we should just bang in the woods here, maybe a minute or two?
That's just to round it out. The Firm is such an important Hackman movie. He's like horny Gene Hackman in that movie.
He's so horny in that movie.
It's great. It's like, oh man, horny Gene Hackman. Didn't know this existed. That leads to another What's Age the Worst. Any scene with Hackman and Hershey kissing, it's just rough. It's like watching your grandparents kiss. It's tough. So Flatch, Hopper's son in this movie, I was flicking channels one night in the 90s, and he was a cop in like a Skinamax erotic thriller. It's not on his IMDb. I don't know if I imagined it. I might have just been super stoned, but I swear I saw that dude as a cop in an erotic thriller. Another What's Age the Worst. Spike Lee tainted this movie for me about 10% when his book, which he wrote with Ralph Wiley, which was excellent, is called Best Seat in the House. His basketball book. I really like it. I recommend it. And he had this whole thing about Hoosiers and how racist it was, how South Bend's roster with the black players, and it was like, here's another white guys banding together to topple the bigger, more talented black players. Like, this started with Rocky versus Apollo, and this becomes this recurring theme in sports movies, and Hoosiers racist. Now, he plants the seed for that. They tried to make this movie authentic, and it's based on that 1954 Milan High team, and the team it went against, which, did have black players. So there was some authentic stuff with it. On the other hand, that Milan High team was really good. And had made, like, for the last 2 years that it don't come close to winning the state title, and then finally won. So it was a little more like Butler, Brad Stevens, kind of an underdog that was actually a really good team. But I'm just mentioning that because it is kind of part of that era of over and over again. It was the white hero against whoever the black, tougher opponent was.
So you and I talked about this before we taped it. So this is the first time I think I went into it with the lens of looking for, like, wait, are they things that I just wouldn't realize when I was younger, And I think our awareness is such now that we're looking at things differently. And, you go back and think, like, when I watch an old movie, I'm like, oh, this is why people think like this movie's bullshit, or just how often, I mean, it sucks, but it just goes without saying, like how many movies it's like, all right, first guy's going to get killed. It's a black guy, like, oh, here's the side. Oh, this guy loses like every time. And it's true. It happened all the time. And now that you go back retroactively and kind of apply some of today's sensibilities to some of these movies, you're like, yeah, this is why this sucks.
There's an awareness that, we didn't have in 1991.
So with that awareness equipped with it, watching this movie this way for the first time, maybe I was looking for it too much, but even with the mistakes that the black players make, that white backcourt for South Bend is a shit show. All right.
Right. They're the ones that cost them the game.
Right. One guy gets stripped. Another guy takes a horrible long two. And then the other white guy, it's 54 and 34. He dribbles into a trap and picks up his dribble at the biggest spot. And then that leads to the turnover. So you had to have everybody kind of make mistakes. You could have said number 10, the black defender, and Jimmy Chitwood should have forced him left. He doesn't do that. But I didn't watch this even with a heightened sensitivity to what mistakes are going to be made. The white backcourt cost South Bend the game. That's not debatable.
It's a great point. Well, here's the last what stage the worst for me. And it's only because I've seen this movie way too many times. Coach Dale, game coach. Are we sure he was good? I'm just going to give you some nuggets. The pass 4 times before every shot rule is just inane. It's just illogical. It's stupid. No, it's just awful. He hired the town drunk as his assistant. He played with 4 guys just to prove a point to his guard, which almost causes a riot. I mean, at some point, you already proved your point. You benched the guy. Now you're going to play with 4 guys? Like, what point are we proving now? He got kicked out of 3 games during the season that we saw. It might have even been more.
Submitted to the state for review by one of the officials. Yeah.
Drunk shooter wanders on the court during a crucial playoff game, and Coach Dale says, that's okay. He's an assistant coach. Just immediately gives a technical. Don't say anything, Coach Dale. Just let the town drunk get pulled off. And then he goes over to Flatch. He goes, you stay in the game. It's like, maybe call timeout, let him regroup. They're down 16-6 in the title game, getting their ass kicked. All the Hickory guys have to point out to coach, like, hey, Jimmy could probably score if we set him some picks. He's like, oh, good idea. Let's do that. And then the title winning shot doesn't set up Jimmy. He runs the play for fucking Merle. State championship on the line. All the guys are bummed out. And then finally Jimmy, who's like a mute, finally has to go, hey, I'll make it. And Coach Dale's like, oh yeah, you're right. You're 14 for 16 in the movie so far. Yeah, you should probably take the final shot. Like, are we sure Coach Dale was a good coach?
The evidence stacked that way is pretty overwhelming.
Didn't play Strap enough. Strap's on the bench rotting away. Guy's an incredible banger.
Yeah, develop your depth. I mean, he's a terrible GM. I mean, immediately, first thing he does is start kicking out wings that look switchable. Those guys look like they're pretty switchable guys.
He's kicking out his 3-and-D wings.
You know what it feels a little bit like? A little Joe Torre-ish. Because if you watch Torre every day, you'd be like, oh, great. I'm going to have 7 arms blown out in the bullpen. We're never going to make any adjustments. Granted, the team was better than everybody else most of the time. But what was Torre great at? Torre was great at getting everybody rowing in the same direction. And even though it was a little tough and abrasive at first for Hackman, I think that his greatest gift as a coach was getting everybody rowing in the same direction. But I don't want to sit here and call him one of the all-time greats when you run through that resume like that. That's tough.
Yeah, if we were on First Take talking about coach the next day, there would have been a whole segment of like, of course he won with Jimmy Chitwood. The guy's the best player in the state. Should have won by more. Yeah, why was every one of these games close? He had the best asset in Indiana. Casting what ifs. Didn't know this.
Is Gene Hackman clutch?
Is Gene Hackman elite? Casting what ifs. Jack Nicholson wanted to play Coach Dale. He was a witness in a lawsuit, sidelined him for 6 months. There's a tight schedule, and he told them they could find another actor. Go ahead. If not, he could do it a year from now. They say, fuck it. They get Gene Hackman. Nicholson sees the film after it comes out, tells the director, the movie was great, the stars are great, but if I had been the star, it would have been a mega hit. Jack Nicholson. I don't think he's wrong, by the way. I do think it's a bigger movie in 1986 if Nicholson's a star. He's one of the biggest movie stars in the world at that point. As big as Hackman was, he wasn't an opening the movie star like Jack was. Jack as a basketball coach would have been really fun. I would have enjoyed it. I would have felt like he wanted to get drunk with Shooter in every scene, though. I guess would have been the...
Hackman's just so much more believable as... Well, even though he's coming
it's
from
a different
Ithaca,
movie. It's a good path.
It's a different movie. You know, you can't doubt Jack, but it's impossible for me. It's 35 years of watching this thing. I can't reprogram myself to think of Jack taking it away from Norman. That's
how I feel as well. I think he would have gone terms of endearment astronaut kind of performance, like a little more scaled back. The other one was Harry Dean Stanton turned down Shooter. And that's how they got Hopper. And years later expressed a lot of regret. Couldn't remember his reasons for not doing it. Best That Guy, aka the Joey Pants Award, is the next category. So Chelsea Ross is the winner, but I kind of feel like he's Chelsea Ross. I don't know if he's that guy. For years he was that guy, but then I think he kind of became Chelsea Ross. He had the incredible triumvirate of Hoosiers, Major League, and Rudy. He's Dan Devine and Rudy. He's Eddie, the garbage pitcher in Major League.
Innings eater.
And then George in Hoosiers, which is three pretty good. Could call him the Robert Horry of sports movies, even if you want to get really ambitious. I think Horry. He might just be Chelsea Ross. So I think the winner is the guy who played the assistant, the dad who comes the assistant the second half of the movie, Roland Butcher. That guy's just Roland Butcher, and he's been in some movies. Like you go on his IMDb, he's been in stuff. He was in The Untouchables. His name is Robert Swan. I think he's our winner.
Well, I mean, if you're taking away the Major League guy, I mean, I don't know what was in his contract because they go, hey, every game, 3 cutaways. To
3 cutaways to like a fist pump or
having a
he's
blast.
Good.
He's so good in it because he's really good at just kind of being like, who's this outsider? You may be the head coach, but I'm the head coach. The barber scene, which we haven't even touched on, is perfect. It's a really good way of like introducing, if you don't know this world, hey, here's this town. This is what's important. They're just start rattling just to have Hackman be like, all right, see you guys. Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time and bounce. He was the guy that I was going to pick, but you're right. I mean, he's almost too prominent.
I feel like he's Chelsea Russ. The Vincent Hanna Give Me All You Got award for overacting or dialing it up. It's got to go to Hopper. He dials it up. I fully support it. I have no regrets, but he dials
How about when
it
he's
up.
almost dead? Did you think he was dead the first time you saw it? Just Bender in the woods?
Yeah, that's a different movie.
Yeah.
We're just at his Shooter's funeral. It would have been a weird vibe. Dion Waiters is tough because I don't think Shooter's eligible. I think he's in too much of the movie. And
that's the cop. It's the cop.
The cop.
Yeah, no, it's definitely the cop. When I was going to the awards, I was stumped and I go, wait a minute, this isn't hard. The cop shows up to practice freaking out. He's mad at the meeting. He comes into the locker room at halftime. Yeah. He's like, what the hell are you guys doing down here?
Great call. Recasting couch.
You know what, by the way, I love that it was the cop because it was a little bit more believable that he could just do whatever he wanted to do because he was the town cop. Whereas if it was just a random guy, eventually he'd be like, how come no one's kicked the shit out of this guy yet?
Right.
Like, leave us alone.
Cop.
But it was very strategic and smart to have it be the cop.
Recasting couch. I wouldn't touch this movie. You could talk me into some Barbara Hershey alternatives, but I like how evil she is in the movie. I think it's good to have a villain. And
What about Meryl Streep as the head coach?
As the head coach, as Norma Dale? Maybe
they remake this. They remake this. It's Meryl Streep.
Well, it's a women's basketball movie if they remake it, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. Half-assed research. Shooter was supposed to attend the state championship game in the script. You'll appreciate this. You're a writer. Hopper didn't like it. He had just gotten sober. He said, no, that Shooter wouldn't do that. He'd be trying to get his life together. He wouldn't want to go to the game. He'd be afraid of lapsing back into old habits. So they decided not to have him at the game. They decided to have him in the hospital instead.
Wow.
Pretty good.
It didn't need it. Yeah.
Jimmy Chitwood's real name is Maris Valanis. He became a golf pro in California. Only guy who didn't play college ball in this game.
Well, every other guy played college basketball because there's one of the guys, I forget which guard, for Hickory. There's a couple times he brings the ball up, and I was like, hey, he looks a little loose. That's just the evaluator in me.
Little loose with his left. They knew Richmond, Indiana was where they shot most of the Hickory stuff. So maybe when I went to Knightstown, maybe the actual downtown was different. But
Did the
I
Grantland
definitely
staff they just tricked you.
They might have tricked me.
Just drive to a small town. He's getting older.
You'll love this. The NCAA suspended 5 of the actors who were college basketball players for being in this movie and getting paid because the NCAA sucks at all times. Here's Hopper's trick for being drunk in a movie.
Okay.
He wanted a 10-second notice before the director called action. He would spin around in a circle for 10 seconds and then be a little disoriented. And that's how he would stagger. That's how he staggered on the court and appeared drunk because he was actually like disoriented. And he said he remembered James Dean doing this in Giant in 1956. There you go.
I love that. I love that. The other people said, or you could just show up.
Yeah, or just pretend to be drunk. So Chitwood, a.k.a. Maris Valanis, they told him, we only really have one chance to shoot this fans rushing the floor scene for the state championship game. So if you miss it, we'll cheat it after and we'll film it again. And in rehearsal, he missed every shot, almost every shot. When they actually filmed it, he made it.
That's my guy.
So that's why he was really especially fired up. In the locker room before the final game, on the blackboard are all the last names of the players in the opposing team, which are the real names of the Hickory guys. Milan High, which I mentioned, they won 32-30. Hickory won 42-40. The 1954 final ended with Bobby Plump, who is the real life Jimmy Chitwood. He made the final shot. Pretty much the same spot. It was filmed in Butler University's Hinkle Fieldhouse. And so we had all that. And then apparently there's a scene in one of the montages when Norman Dale says something to Shooter on the bench and Shooter laughs. The director finds out years later what they were laughing at. Gene Hackman told Hopper, I hope you've invested well because you and I are never going to work again after this movie. It's a career-ending film for both of us. And Hopper laughed, and that's in there. Because Hackman was like poison on the set, apparently. Come on, Gene Hackman. And then the last one is a bummer, which I had forgotten, but the guy who played Merle was named Kent Poole. Killed himself in 2003. So, sad one. Everyone else is still alive. Apex Mountain. Hackman, no. Hopper, no. Basketball?
All the basketball guys? Yes.
All the basketball guys, yes. Just basketball?
I love when you do this. This sort of like...
I'm going to say no. Sports movies.
It's close.
I think you can make a case this was the apex of sports movies because we're coming off 12 years of just bangers. We got Longest Yard, 4 Rockies, Slapshot, Caddyshack. Just go through. It's a murderers were long. Just every sport breaking away. Every sport has one, and then it kind of peaks with this. And then from 86 on, we either have to. It's people ripping off the movies we've already seen, or the evolution which has happened the last 12 years, which we talked about when United Warrior, which is movies that happen to be rooted in sports in some way, but they're really just movies.
Yeah, I also think it kind of set a template or whatever for a lot of the Disney stuff that happened later on. Where, I mean, we're getting it's the same formula. It's just different pictures, you know? And not to say like this is the first underdog movie. It's certainly not true. But there was, there can be some real cheesiness to something like this when you attempt to do it. It's almost like everybody's on the same page, just going, hey, let's just going to make it cheesy. He's underdog. Remember, too, mid-'80s, we're still Cold War. We're freaking out about it. I remember just being in grade school. I mean, I don't know if the younger audience can appreciate this as much as you should. And I'm not saying like feel bad, but it was a weird time, man, to be a little kid because you just kind of kept thinking Russia was going to blow you up for a couple of years. Like that's just how you operated. I don't know how it was for you in high school. You guys probably had a little bit more worldly perspective. But I remember we'd just be, we'd go to bathroom break before recess, being 7, 8, 9, 10 years old and just thinking like the world is going to end. It was fucking weird. We just were like cool with it. Like, oh yeah, man, I don't know. I guess they could hit us with some big bomb or something. And I think there was an escapism. Granted, all these movies are that in a way, but these stories that make you feel good, these down home movies, like, were a nice escapism from just a time where really we didn't have as much access to information. So the information could kind of be the same all the time. And I don't know if I'm misreading that. I mean, again, this is where the age gap can play. But that was a real thing as a little kid that I'll never forget, because it was just so fucking weird how you just accepted this thing that you didn't even know about, this enemy, this make-believe enemy that you're just in fear of.
I think it was real. I was in high school at that point when The Day After came out. I remember the NBC movie.
Unbelievable.
About the nuclear bomb, which was like really emotionally scarring for everybody right. 18 and under. It really fucked everybody up. It's like, here's what it's going to be like when the world ends. And it felt realistic.
We should do that movie.
They never show that movie. I'd be interested to see.
I'd like to watch.
I'm sure the
again.
Special effects are awful. I'm sure it's on YouTube. Last Apex Mountain, Indiana.
I'm going to say Keith Smart.
Good call. All right, picking nits. The South Bend Highs coach. I'll never understand why he ran a play. Let's just go through that. I'm just going to give you the background. They're up 4 in the final minute. There's no shot clock. If you watch any of the old NBA stuff from back then, it's just Bob Cousy dribbling around with a 2-point lead for an hour as guys try to steal the ball. And I think if you fouled back then, you got the ball back. They call a play, and the announcer's like, "Oh, they're calling a play!" And then the guy clangs a shot and opens the door for Hickory. Hickory scores. Now it's 54-52. Or whatever the score was. Hickory's down 2. Probably call a timeout there. No timeout. Bring it back up. Steal. Hickory scores. No timeout. Another turnover. Dribbles into a trap. Tie game. And then another turnover after that. It's on par with Rick Adelman in the early 90s and Mike Dunleavy in the 2000 against the Lakers, and Stan Van Gundy against the Lakers in Game 4 in 2009, and some of the worst coaching moments I think we've ever seen.
Yeah, I don't know. You're up early. Did that plant some seed of confidence? Did they get overconfident? Human nature kicks in. All right, these guys from Hickory, this thing's over. Are
they trying to run it up? Are we trying to get up by 10 with the final score?
His guards are a mess. I don't even know how they got to the title game.
Me neither. And then coach not diagramming the final play to Jimmy is just an ongoing nitpick for me. We're supposed to believe this guy's an amazing dude. The Chitwood hiatus, which is just thrown away like, yeah, the coach died. We talked about that. And then Buddy reemerging, which we covered. He's gone for about 15 minutes. And then he just shows up again. And I don't think they realized we'd be rewatching this movie for 100 years. Could this be remade as a 10-episode Netflix show?
Absolutely.
Interesting idea. I'm not against it. I actually was more bullish on it than I thought I was going to be.
The thing is, though, is if you try to do an updated version and put it into today, then you're not doing Hoosiers. You actually have to do it during this time period.
1951. I'm with you.
Some of this remake stuff, like, you could call it that, but if you're doing a 2021 high school in the middle of nowhere, then you're not telling the same story.
Probably unanswerable questions.
Oh wait, I had one more pick and knit.
Let's go.
Well, back to shooter scouting service pre-online. I need to know how he knows everything about everybody, because I'll tell you this: when I'm hungover, I don't want to read box scores as soon as I wake up.
Well, also the box scores were basically like somebody made 9 field goals and 2 free throws and scored 20 points.
Right. Okay.
It's not like you can learn a lot from box scores.
Right. I mean, I imagine he's getting a paper delivered, but that's a cost. So you got to worry about that. Maybe you grab one from the diner a little bit later on. I need to know about his scouting world. Maybe that's the spinoff, Shooter the Scout.
It's at least an episode of the Netflix series.
At least
some of his scouting techniques. Yeah, fair. Probably an answerable question. So when I was writing for Page 2 in 2001, my first year, I did a mailbag question, and somebody asked what Roy Hobbs' stats were in the natural, and I tried to figure that out, and it was really fun. And people were like, "Whoa, that was awesome!" So then when I did a Hoosiers diary in 2002, I actually tried to figure out the Hoosiers box score for this game. So here's all the evidence. This I'm not going to change the work I did back then because I think I really put time into it. So looks like we had 8-minute quarters back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it would have been. It would have been. Yeah.
So we see it's 16-6.
It was 8 quarters, 8-minute quarters for me. Because I mean, college was 2 20-minute halves. So anyway, go ahead.
So it's 16-6 in the second quarter, 7:34 left, and everyone with Jimmy was probably ice cold. We see Jimmy score 26 of the next 36 points, all field goals. So we're not even counting free throws, and they win 42-40. We see Flatch score twice. We see Wade and Buddy score once. So that's 34 of the 42 points are accounted for. So when I tried to guess the box score, I had Jimmy going 14 for 18 for 30 points. So he would have 30 of the 42. Buddy with 4, Raid with 4, Flatch with 4. I had Merle going 0 for 3. It seemed like Merle was cold in that game. I think he was more like on the defensive side. I don't think Strapch scored. I think Flatch finished with 4, 9 rebounds, maybe 10, 9, 10 rebound range, probably the leading rebounder. And maybe Jimmy hits 2 free throws. So I have him down for 30 of the 42. Does that feel high, low, or just right for you? Again, we see him score 26. So we'd have to.
So there's clips of him totaling 26 points.
We see him make 13
final.
shots. Yeah.
He makes 13 shots.
He's 13 for 14 for what we see in the final.
Yeah, I don't think there was a ton of offense coming from anywhere else.
Yeah. All right. Well, we settled that.
How can I argue that?
You can't argue that.
Yeah.
I really laid it out. Did Hoosiers invent the slow clap?
I've got a couple of buddies that have convinced they've started it.
The answer is no.
Okay.
This actually is answerable. It starts in Brubaker with Robert Redford. Robert Redford's a prison warden, and he pretends he's a prisoner. This is a great movie, by the way. I highly recommend Brubaker. Goes undercover in the prison to find out like how brutal it is in the prison because he wants to change the system. Comes back out and they railroad him and he ends up losing his job. But all the prisoners like respect that he cared. So as he's driving off, somebody does and then all the prisoners slow clap him as the car drives away. And that's like 1980. I think Brubaker invented the slow clap.
It wasn't Spartacus.
Was there one in Spartacus? I don't know. I think it's the best slow clap, though. The slow clap in the locker room, which has become a huge Jumbotron thing. I mean, that thing's probably the Hoosier slow clap has been the probably biggest NBA Jumbotron, which leads to my next question.
By the way, Brubaker, did they not recognize their own warden, or was it a different jail?
It was a new hire. Yeah, it was. They weren't with them. Good plot twist.
Smart.
Coach Dale and Hickory High, have they been on more NBA Jumbotrons than any other characters from a movie, in your opinion? Our other nominees, Senator John Butarski, Animal House, Mel Gibson, Braveheart. But then the Mel Gibson stuff got a little dicey. But first 5 years, Gibson's in the lead. But then, he has some issues at Moonshadows. Who else is in there in the running for you?
Okay, you know what's embarrassing is I don't even remember what the movie is when the old guy's in front of the classroom and he's like, you're going to get up, you're going to get out of those chairs, you're going to open up the windows, you know what I'm talking about?
What movie is that?
They play it in the garden all the time. And every time it comes up, I'm like, how do I not know what this is?
Craig, do you know what movie that is?
Craig's not going to know.
No, I don't know.
It's old. It's really old.
I don't know that one.
What about Training Day? Do they play that in Jumbotrons?
I think it's the slow clap. I think that's the number one. I think there's some Independence Day, I think has been the Bill Pullman speech probably gets thrown, but...
What about
is it from the movie Network?
Oh, it's Network. Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, it's Network. Yeah, good call. Way to go, Craig. No, I think it's the slow clap from this.
What about Moving Violations with Jim Murray?
I don't know that one. Could the pass 4 times before every shot rule work for the 2022 Celtics? If Ime Udoka put that in now, would it help the team? I feel like it might.
At this point, I'd be okay with it. And I hate it more than anything. Like any coach that would tell you to do that kind of stuff, or we're not going to have a ball the first week. I'd be fine with the Celtics doing it because they're veering towards not a great time to watch.
Why wasn't the Buddy Dentine scene ever in a Dentine ad? It seemed like the most natural integration, right? To just grab that scene, put that in. I don't know what Dentine's thinking. Do they still make Dentine? I don't even know. Is Dentine out?
What's your gum situation?
I'm a Mentos guy. I really like the Mentos. I like the
like
big
the Mentos
bottles of the Mentos. I like
gum?
the big gum Mentos. Yeah, in the bigger bottles. I like the citrus and I like the spearmint. Only you could answer this next question. Unanswerable. What did Jimmy Chitwood's next 15 years look like? Off the top of your head. Makes the winning shot.
Early pregnancy.
From that night, maybe?
Easily. Maybe 2 people. He talks about going to Milwaukee to follow up on some insurance office that a cousin started. But
no college ball for Jimmy? He's the state hero.
Yeah, but clearly there's some red flags about his commitment.
I think he goes to like the University of Indiana or somewhere along those lines and drops out in 4 weeks.
Well, that's the Bird thing. Like, I didn't realize that when I was younger. I mean, you tell it better than I would, but like Larry Bird was at Indiana and he walked home, right?
Well, the team was mean to him.
Right. And he was
They
poor.
thought he was a hick. He was poor. He didn't fit in. He had never lived in his own room before. Had a lot of issues. Kent Benson was one of the leaders on the team. It was ironically this incredible Indiana team that could have also had Bird that went undefeated one of those years. But he hated Kent Benson. And every time they played Kent Benson when he was on the Celtics, he would torture Kent Benson, leading to Kevin McHale's 56-point game against Kent Benson and the Pistons, where Bird's just feeding him and McHale's like destroying Kent Benson. It's like, hey, you motherfucker, you mean to me 10 years ago. Yeah, I think it ends the same way for Chitwood. I think he drops out.
Bird also, and this is what's really cool. This isn't Drive, right? I don't know how many times it's been told, but I remember the first time I learned about it. Is Bird is dealing. It's hard for him. It's hard for him because he's holding on to some stuff, and he said, "Hey, I was wearing the same white T-shirt every day, and I'm around people and kids that have money." And Coach Knight was like, well, "I don't give a shit." And Knight even said, if I had understood him a little bit better, I might have been a little bit more understanding, but I just didn't at this time. And then he went back and started, he was playing softball in French Lick and working at the parks.
Who's a garbage man. Yeah, he was in the sanitation for like a year. And then ended up enrolling to French Lick. I think it's a pockmark on the Bobby Knight coaching thing that he didn't realize how good Bird was. He had like one of the 5 best players of all time on this team and was like, that guy, fucking loser. Look at his T-shirt. He just completely missed it. What a miss by Bobby Knight. What do Norman Dale's next 10 years look like?
I think he screws over that family. Probably doesn't.
The Fleeners?
Yeah, he's out. Did you see where he's staying? That wasn't a great setup.
I think it comes out a week later that he was involved in the punching the student incident at his own school and he has to resign in disgrace. He's canceled. It's first cancel. It's Norm Dale canceled by the Indiana community.
What do you think? Do you think it goes on? Because he's not coaching college hoops ever again.
Well, do we factor in the deleted scene that we know about now where she invites him to go to Chicago?
Who's he going to coach there?
He follows Chicago. Maybe he's doing like some Div 2 school and outside of Chicago. I don't know.
Changes his name, goes Don Draper style, coaches Marquette.
Bob Dale. What piece of memorabilia would you want from this movie? I'm going to give you 4 choices. You could have the entire Hickory warm-up suit that they wore, like that yellow one. You could have Jimmy's game-worn jersey from the state championship game. You could have one of the original Hickory Letterman jackets that they wear when they measure the basket in the gym. Or you can have the giant framed 1952 state champs picture at the end of the movie that they hone in on. I think that's my choice.
You'd want the team picture?
Yeah, the original one. That'd be fucking amazing.
That'd be an amazing thing to have. Would
Be
you be able
like,
to put
what's
that
that?
up would that be in the office, or could you get away with that in the house?
No, I'm fucking living rooming that. My wife's just taking one for the team on that one. They're like, look, this is going in the living room. We're prominently displaying this.
This is in the entrance. We're gonna have it displayed.
It dangles.
Chandelier, right?
What would you go with?
I would want Chitwood's jersey. Frame that. Frame that,
Game
and then wear it as a plaque as you walk through the street with a bell.
Who won the movie for you?
Hackman.
I have Hackman as well.
What are the other choices? If we're being honest?
I think he wins. So is this the greatest sports movie of all time to you still, all these years later, 35 years?
I love Warrior. And I'm glad we got to do that one. I kind of love Cool Runnings.
Wow, Cool Runnings. That's a great one.
I thought it was really well done.
Yeah.
And the way they it wanted to pull all those emotional strings, but it worked. It wasn't cheesy. Like in the moment, the first time I watched it, maybe I'd watch it now and think it's cheesy. I really thought they did it cool, but that's my affinity for the people of Negril. They know that. They know how I feel about them.
I did the big picture with Sean, which ran last week before people hear this. And it was top 5 favorite sports movies was like how we did the second part of the thing. And I didn't have Hoosiers in the top 5, but I think it was only because I hadn't seen it in a while. And now I wish I'd had it.
What were your top 5? I didn't think about this, so go ahead. Give me your 5. Maybe there's something else I'm not thinking about. There's something else I'm not thinking about right now.
Doing this from memory, but one was Caddyshack, just because I just enjoy it the most.
Well, if that's allowed, then that I don't even know what's close to it because it is that great of a movie. It just I don't know. I just
enjoy it the most. Right. I had Slapshot, Rocky 3, Rounders, and one other one. But Hoosiers should have made it. Hoosiers should have been in there. I count Rounders as a sports movie, and to me, that's like
that's not
one of my favorites.
Movie. It's not a sports movie.
Cards are sports. Come on.
I don't know about
that. But
I
should add Hoosiers in there. Cool Runnings is a good one. I got to watch that one again. I haven't seen that one in a while.
This might be I don't know where I was at in life when I saw it in the theater. I just really liked it. I might be embarrassed to be saying it out loud now because I haven't seen it in forever. Maybe I'll be like, why the hell did you bring that up? I'm not even telling you I have Cool Runnings ahead of it, but there's one other sports movie that I'm not thinking about. I don't think it's Friday Night Lights. It's not. And Blue Chips was really good. That was fun.
Have you seen Rollerball?
Yeah, when I was younger.
Rollerball is an absolutely fascinating rewatch right now with kind of where we are with football and what we know about what it does to guys, and how little the league cares about the players. It's really ahead of its time. It's a really, 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 really smart movie that anticipated a lot of things. Hey, and I was surprised by it.
I got to see that. Is Hoop Dreams, is it allowed or no, because it's a doc?
I personally allow it. I think docs should count as sports movies because they're ultimately movies.
Hoop Dreams is number 1. Hoop Dreams is number 1 for me then. Because watching it in the theater, that was heavy.
Yeah.
It was heavy. It was heavy shit, and it was perfectly done. So I now that I think about it, if you're allowing me to have a documentary in there, as I'm kind of just doing this off the cuff, I'd probably have Hoop Dreams ahead of everything else.
Craig.
Yo.
Have you seen Hoop Dreams?
No.
Yeah, see, I don't think people under 35 even know what Hoop Dreams is. And what it was the first great sports documentary ever, and it paved the way for everything, including 30 for 30.
I mean, I'd heard of it, but I've never seen it.
Yeah. And it was the way they did it. I mean, it was so much easier to do it now where you're just following 2 high school kids. To do it back then with the fucking cameras that were like 60 pounds and lugging shit around. Like you were lugging shit around when you were filming things until probably late 2000s. But that movie's amazing. What'd you think of Hoosiers, Craig?
I loved it. The entire movie, I didn't understand why the woman, Barbara Hershey, why is she going to any of the games? If she hates basketball, why is she at any of the games? I don't understand.
Hickory.
I think she loves Jimmy. I think she's looking out for Jimmy.
I think she likes the attention.
She wants to be the curmudgeon who's not standing up when they do the wave.
I guess I'll go.
Russillo, the 10-episode Hoosiers series, do you think And Craig, I'll ask you this too. Is one of the episodes, maybe the cop's a little like the guy in The Shield? Maybe he's like covering up murder, killing people and covering them up. He's just completely off the rails. He's got his own justice. I think I'd be in. That's maybe episode 4. Stretching it out.
Based on his attitude throughout the movie, I wouldn't rule it out. He's not incapable of any of those things.
And George is definitely up to some shady business stuff. I think you'd have to add that piece as well.
Maybe mix in a little Yellowstone where the cattle are sick and Norman has to fix it.
Ah, man. Hoosiers. What a movie. This was produced by Craig Horlbeck. You can listen to Russillo on the Ryen Russillo podcast. You can listen to me on my podcast. And we will see you next week on the Rewatchables. Thanks, Russillo.
Thanks, guys.